The Valkyrie had been dying for 10,000 years. They were old. Older than most stars. Older than entire galaxies. They had built worlds from nothing. They had created suns when they needed light. They had conquered death itself, living for millions of years as beings of pure thought and energy. They were gods in everything but name. And now they were going to die. Their universe was breaking. Not from war. Not from sickness. The very laws that held reality together were changing. The numbers that made atoms work, that made light travel, that made life possible. These numbers were shifting. Slowly. Terribly. Like a house whose foundations were crumbling grain by grain. At first, they did not believe it. They ran the calculations 1,000 times. 1,000,000 times. They built machines to check the machines. But the answer was always the same. Their dimension, their home, their entire reality was dying. In a few hundred years, nothing would remain. Not even dust. Not even memory. The Valkyrie held a great council. 17 billion minds joined together, thinking as one. They debated for decades. Some wanted to fight. But how do you fight mathematics? How do you make war against the laws of physics? Others wanted to find a way to escape, to travel to another dimension. But in all their millions of years, they had never found proof that other dimensions existed. They were alone. They had always been alone. In the end, they decided to build a monument. If they could not live, they would at least be remembered. They would send a message not to anyone in particular, because there was no one to send it to. They would send it into the void between dimensions, into the theoretical spaces that might or might not exist. It would be a scream into the darkness. A final cry that said, "We were here. We lived. We mattered." They called it the resonance engine. It took them 200 years to build. The device was beautiful and terrible, a machine that could shake the fabric of reality itself. It would encode their message into gravitational waves, into quantum patterns, into the very structure of space-time. The message would contain everything: their history, their art, their science, their dreams. It would be their grave marker, floating forever in the spaces between worlds. They activated the resonance engine and sent their message into nothing. Then they went back to waiting for death. They never expected anyone to hear. Far away, in a dimension the Valkyrie did not believe could exist, a small blue planet circled an ordinary yellow star. The creatures living on this planet called it Earth. They called themselves humans. By Valkyrie standards, they were infants. Their entire civilization was only a few thousand years old. Their individual lives lasted less than a century. They were soft, fragile, and mortal in ways the Valkyrie had forgotten long ago. But they were curious. And they were stubborn. And they had built machines to listen to the universe. Dr. Amara Okonkwo worked at the LIGO-7 Observatory, a facility designed to detect gravitational waves from deep space. She had spent 15 years listening to the cosmos. She had heard black holes collide. She had heard neutron stars tear each other apart. She had heard the echoes of the Big Bang itself. She had never heard anything like this. The signal appeared on her screen at 3:47 in the morning. At first, she thought it was an error. The pattern was too regular, too structured. Natural events did not produce waves like this. But as she studied the data, her hands began to shake. There was mathematics in the signal. Not random patterns that looked like math, but actual equations. Actual information. Someone, somewhere, had sent a message. Amara called her supervisor. Her supervisor called the director. The director called the United Earth Council. Within hours, the greatest minds on Earth were staring at the same data, all asking the same question. What was this? Who had sent it? And what did it mean? The decoding took 3 weeks. Human computers were not designed for this kind of work. The message existed in 11 dimensions, encoded in ways that human mathematics could barely describe. But piece by piece, they figured it out. The message was a story. The story of a species called the Valkyrie. Their rise, their achievements, their slow, terrible fall. It contained technical information, 2 blueprints for technology that humanity could not even begin to understand. Dimensional gates, energy sources, machines that could reshape reality. But more than that, the message contained a date, a time stamp. And when the Earth scientists converted it to human time, they made a terrible discovery. The Valkyrie had made a mistake. They had assumed that time flowed the same way in all dimensions. They had calculated that by the time anyone heard their message, they would have been dead for thousands of years. The message was meant to be a memorial, nothing more. A whisper from a grave. But time did not flow the same way. The dimensions were not synchronized. And when Amara ran the final calculations, she sat back in her chair and stared at the ceiling for a long time. The Valkyrie were not dead. They were dying right now. At this very moment. 17 billion beings, the last survivors of an ancient civilization, huddled around a dying star, waiting for the end. And they had sent humanity everything needed to save them. The message was not a memorial. It was a blueprint. A detailed, complete guide to building technology that could tear open the walls between dimensions. The Valkyrie had included it because they wanted to preserve their knowledge, not because they thought anyone would use it. It was an archive, not an instruction manual. But humanity saw it differently. Amara looked at the schematics. She looked at the time stamp. She looked at the estimated time until the Valkyrie dimension collapsed entirely. They had time. Not much, maybe a year, maybe 2, but they had time. They didn't ask for help, Amara said quietly. They sent a goodbye letter. They thought no one would ever read it. Her supervisor nodded slowly. But we did read it. We understood it. And now we know people are dying. The question hung in the air between them. What do you do when you intercept a death cry from beings you never knew existed? What do you do when you have the power to help, even if no one asked you to? For the Valkyrie, the answer would have been complicated. They would have debated. They would have calculated. They would have considered 1,000 factors. For humans, the answer was simple. Someone was in trouble. Someone needed help. That was all that mattered. The United Earth Council met in Geneva. Representatives from every nation, every colony, every human settlement in the solar system gathered in one room. They had all seen the data. They had all heard the message. Now they had to decide what to do about it. The debate lasted 17 hours. Admiral Yusuf Rahman spoke first. He was a practical man, a military man, someone who dealt in facts and numbers. He pointed at the holographic display showing the Valkyrie schematics. Let me be clear about what we are discussing, he said. This technology is beyond us. The energy requirements alone exceed everything humanity has ever produced. We would need to build power stations around the sun itself. We would need materials that do not exist on Earth. We would need to invent entirely new fields of science. He paused, letting his words sink in. And even if we could build it, we have no guarantee it would work. The physics involved are theoretical at best. We could pour every resource we have into this project and fail. We could destroy ourselves trying to help strangers we have never met. Dr. Chen Wei, the council's lead physicist, stood up next. She was smaller than the admiral, quieter, but when she spoke, people listened. The admiral is correct that this technology is beyond our current capabilities, she said. But he is wrong to say we cannot build it. The message contains not just blueprints, but theory. Complete detailed theory. Given enough time and resources, we could develop this technology ourselves. How much time? Someone asked. 50 years. Perhaps longer. The room erupted. 50 years was too long. The Valkyrie dimension would collapse in months, maybe a year at most. By the time humanity built the technology to save them, there would be no one left to save. The arguments continued. Some said it was impossible, and they should not even try. Some said they had a moral duty to try anyway. Some said they should focus on preserving the Valkyrie knowledge instead of attempting a rescue. Some said the whole thing might be a trap, a trick by alien beings to steal human resources. Then Commander Elena Vasquez stood up. She was not a politician or a scientist. She was a pilot, a rescue specialist, someone who had spent her entire career pulling people out of impossible situations. She had flown into hurricanes and war zones and the crushing depths of Jupiter's atmosphere. She was not used to giving speeches, but she had something to say. "I have been listening to this debate for 15 hours, she said. "And I think we are asking the wrong question." The room went quiet. Everyone keeps asking whether we can do this, whether it is possible, whether we have the technology or the resources or the time. She shook her head. Those are important questions, but they are not the first question. She walked to the holographic display and pointed at the image of the Valkyrie star system. The dying star, the crumbling planets, the 17 billion beings waiting for the end. "The first question is simple," she said. "People are dying. Right now. At this moment. And we have a chance, however small, to save them. Do we try or do we walk away?" Admiral Raymond stood up again. "Commander, with respect, this is not a rescue mission. This is a civilization. 17 billion beings. We cannot just fly in and why not?" The Admiral stared at her. "What? Why not?" Vasquez repeated. "Because it is hard. Because it might fail. Because they are strangers." She met his eyes steadily. "I have spent my entire life answering distress calls. I had flown into situations where everyone told me the odds were too long, the risks too high, the people too far gone. Sometimes they were right. Sometimes I failed. Sometimes I lost people." Her voice hardened. "But I had never once refused to try." The debate continued after that, but something had changed. The impossible suddenly seemed less impossible. The risks seemed less important than the rewards. One by one, the representatives began to speak in favor of the mission. Not everyone agreed. Some voted no. Some abstained. Some walked out in protest. But when the final count came in, the result was clear. Humanity would try. The Prometheus Initiative began the next day. Every nation contributed what it could. The factories of Earth produced materials around the clock. The shipyards of Mars built components that had never existed before. The miners of the asteroid belt worked double shifts, pulling rare metals from rocks that had floated in space for billions of years. The scientists of Luna developed new theories in weeks that should have taken decades. It was the largest project in human history. Larger than the pyramids, larger than the space elevators, larger than the colonization of Mars. Every human being, whether they supported the mission or not, was affected. Taxes went up. Luxuries disappeared. The economy shifted from growth to pure production. And people died. 312 people died in the first year alone. Accidents, mostly. Experimental technology was dangerous, and humanity was moving faster than safety allowed. A dimensional resonator exploded on a research station, creating a microscopic black hole that consumed the entire facility and everyone inside. A test pilot was torn apart when her ship's prototype engine created a feedback loop in local spacetime. A team of engineers was exposed to exotic radiation that rewrote their DNA and killed them over the course of agonizing weeks. Each death was a tragedy. Each death was also a lesson. Humanity learned. Humanity adapted. Humanity kept building. Dr. Amara Okonkwo worked 20-hour days, translating Valkyrie theory into human engineering. Commander Vasquez trained volunteers for a mission that might kill them all. Admiral Rahman, despite his initial doubts, used his military experience to coordinate the massive logistics of the project. And slowly, impossibly, the ship took shape. The UECS Prometheus was not beautiful. It was not elegant. It was a machine built for one purpose and one purpose only: to tear a hole between dimensions and save 17 billion lives. It bristled with equipment that had not existed 2 years ago. Its engines could produce more power than most star systems. Its hull was made of materials that had been theoretical until humans needed them to be real. The crew was chosen carefully. Not the best pilots, not the smartest scientists, but volunteers. People who understood the risks. People who had looked at the odds and decided to try anyway. On the day of launch, Commander Vasquez addressed the council one last time. "We do not know if this will work," she said. "We do not know if we will survive. But we know that somewhere, someone is dying. And we know that we can help." She smiled. "That is enough for us." The Prometheus launched toward the void between dimensions. Behind it, humanity watched and waited and hoped. They had done everything they could. Now they could only pray it was enough. The space between dimensions was not empty. It was not quiet. It was screaming. Commander Elena Vasquez gripped the arms of her chair as the Prometheus shook around her. The ship's dimensional engines were working, tearing a hole through reality itself, but the process was violent. Alarms blared. Lights flickered. Crew members shouted readings that made no sense: negative mass, inverted time, distances measured in imaginary numbers. "Hull integrity at 60%, her first officer reported. "The stress is beyond design parameters." "The whole mission is beyond design parameters," Vasquez replied. "Hold course." The journey took 7 hours. It felt like 7 years. The crew experienced time differently as they passed through the space between spaces. Some saw their entire lives flash before their eyes. Some heard voices of people long dead. Some felt nothing at all, just a terrible emptiness that threatened to swallow them whole. And then, suddenly, they were through. The Prometheus emerged into a dying universe. The first thing Vasquez noticed was the sky. It was wrong. Not dark, but dim, like a light bulb about to burn out. The stars were faded things, pale shadows of what stars should be. Some winked out as she watched, not exploding, just fading, their nuclear fires simply stopping because the laws of physics no longer supported them. The second thing she noticed was the planets. They were dissolving, not breaking apart, but losing coherence at the quantum level. Mountains became dust, became nothing. Oceans evaporated into atoms that forgot how to be atoms. Entire worlds were disappearing into the void. The third thing she noticed was the last star. It hung in the center of the destruction, a dim red giant that somehow still burned. Around it, in orbits that should have been impossible, clustered the remains of the Valkyrie civilization. Stations and ships and structures made of pure energy, all huddled around the only source of warmth left in their universe. 17 billion beings, waiting to die. "Open communications," Vasquez ordered. "All frequencies. Let them know we are here." The message went out. Simple, direct, human. "This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Coalition ship Prometheus. We received your message. We are here to help." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the Valkyrie responded. Vasquez had expected words. She had expected a voice, perhaps translated through their ship's computers. What she got was something else entirely. The Valkyrie spoke directly into her mind. Their voice was not one voice, but billions. 17 billion consciousnesses speaking in perfect harmony. It was overwhelming, terrifying, beautiful. It was the voice of a species so old that human history was less than a heartbeat to them. "What are you?" the voice asked. Vasquez took a breath. She had prepared for this moment. She had practiced what she would say. But now, with a billion minds looking at her, all her preparation seemed pointless. "We are humans," she said simply. "We come from a planet called Earth. We are very young. Our entire species has only existed for a few 100,000 years." "Young," the voice said. There was something in its tone, not contempt but confusion. "You are mortals. We sensed your lifespans when you entered our space. You live for less than a century. Yes, and yet you came here, to this place, to this dying reality. But why?" Vasquez looked at the view screen, at the fading stars, at the dissolving planets, at the 17 billion beings who had built wonders beyond imagination and were now watching everything they had ever created crumble into nothing. "We heard your message," she said. "The memorial. Yes, we sent it into the void, a final record of our existence." The voice paused. "It was not meant to be heard. It was not a request for aid." "We know. Then why have you come?" The question echoed through the ship. Every crew member heard it, not through speakers, but directly in their minds. Why? Why would mortal beings, fragile creatures who lived and died in the blink of an eye, risk everything for strangers they had never met? Vasquez thought about her grandmother, about the stories she used to tell of the old days on Earth, before humanity reached the stars. Stories about fishermen and sailors and the ancient law of the sea. If you hear a distress call, you answer. No matter who is calling, no matter the risk, no matter anything. Because you needed help, Vasquez said. And we could give it. Silence. For a long, terrible moment, there was only silence. Then the Valkyrie spoke again. And this time, their voice was different. Smaller, more uncertain, almost vulnerable. "We do not understand," they said. "We have existed for millions of your years. We have seen species rise and fall like waves on a shore. We have known beings of every kind, predators and prey, builders and destroyers, minds of light and minds of shadow. Never," the voice continued, "have we encountered beings like you, beings who would risk their short, precious lives for strangers, beings who would answer a cry that was not meant to be heard." Vasquez smiled slightly. "Yeah," she said. "We get that a lot." She stood up from her chair and walked to the view screen. Out there, 17 billion beings were waiting, hoping, afraid. "Look," she said, "I am not a philosopher. I am not a diplomat. I am a pilot. I rescue people. That is what I do. And right now, you need rescuing." She turned to her crew. "So let us figure out how to save you." The Valkyrie had never been saved before. They had never needed saving. For millions of years, they had been the ones who solved problems, who overcame obstacles, who conquered every challenge the universe threw at them. But their universe was dying. Their technology was failing. Their power was fading. And here, at the end of everything, a ship full of mortal creatures beings whose entire civilization was younger than many Valkyrie. Individuals had come to help Dot. It was impossible. It was absurd. It was the most unexpected thing that had ever happened in the long history of the Valkyrie species. Dot, and slowly, carefully, they began to hope. Dot the Prometheus extended its docking arms. The Valkyrie opened their shields. Two civilizations, separated by dimensions and by millions of years of evolution, reached out to each other across the void. The rescue had begun. The problem was simple to explain and impossible to solve. That the Valkyrie could not leave their dimension in physical form. Their bodies, if bodies was even the right word, were too connected to their reality. Their consciousness existed across quantum networks that spanned their entire universe. They were not individuals in the human sense. They were patterns of thought, woven into the fabric of their dying space. If they tried to cross into human space as they were, they would simply stop existing. Their patterns would collapse. Their minds would dissolve. It would be death, just in a different form. Dr. Chen Wei worked with the Valkyrie scientists for 18 hours straight, trying to find a solution. The human and alien minds struggled to understand each other. The Valkyrie thought in mathematics that humans could barely comprehend. Humans thought in messy, intuitive leaps that confused the ancient beings. But slowly, they found a way. The Prometheus's dimensional engines could do more than just create a hole between realities. They could create a bridge, a stable tunnel, through which information could flow. Not matter, not energy, but pure information. Consciousness itself. The Valkyrie could transfer their minds through the bridge. On the other side, in human space, they would need new forms, new bodies. The transfer would change them, perhaps forever. They would no longer be what they had been for millions of years, but they would be alive. There was only one problem. Someone had to hold the bridge open. The dimensional tunnel was unstable. Without constant adjustment, it would collapse in seconds. The Prometheus's computers could not handle the calculations fast enough. Only a living mind, connected directly to the ship's systems, could make the necessary adjustments in real time, and the process would take 11 hours. 11 hours of holding a tunnel between dimensions open through pure thought. 11 hours of fighting against the laws of physics. 11 hours of strain that would burn out neural pathways, destroy brain tissue, and kill anyone who attempted it. The human brain could only survive 6 hours of that kind of stress. Commander Vasquez did not hesitate. "I will do it," she said. Her crew protested. Dr. Chen Wei showed her the calculations. 6 hours of survival. 11 hours needed. The math was clear. Whoever held the bridge open would die. Vasquez looked at the numbers and shrugged. "Then we better work fast," she said. The Valkyrie Overmind observed this exchange. 17 billion minds watched as a single human being volunteered to die for them. They did not understand it. They could not understand it. They asked, "Why would you do this? You have only one life. You cannot be restored. You cannot be rebuilt. When you die, you are gone forever." Vasquez was already connecting herself to the neural interface. Wires and sensors attached to her skull, linking her mind to the ship's dimensional engines. "That is correct," she said. "Then why?" She looked up at the view screen, at the fading stars, at the dissolving worlds, at the 17 billion beings who would survive because of what she was about to do. "Because everyone deserves a chance," she said. "Even people I have never met. Even people who did not ask for help. Even people who think they are alone in the universe." She closed her eyes. That is what being human means. The transfer began, one by one. The Valkyrie minds began to flow through the dimensional bridge. It was slow at first, just a trickle of consciousness crossing from one reality to another. But as Vasquez adjusted the bridge, stabilized the tunnel, fought against the collapsing physics of the dying dimension, the flow increased. Thousands became millions. Millions became billions. Inside her mind, Vasquez experienced something no human had ever experienced before. She felt the Valkyrie passing through her, not just their minds, but their memories. Their entire history flowed through her consciousness like a river of light. She saw their beginning. A small species on a small world, looking up at the stars and wondering. She saw their rise. The first ships, the first colonies, the first time they reached beyond their home system. She saw their golden age, ring worlds and artificial suns. Art that spanned galaxies. Music that took centuries to perform. She saw their fall. The first signs of entropy. The desperate searches for solutions. The slow, terrible acceptance that there was no escape. And she saw their hope. Small at first, fragile as a candle flame. The hope that had been born when a ship full of mortals appeared in their dying sky. The hours passed. 6 hours. 7. 8. Vasquez's brain began to fail. Neural pathways burned out. Memories dissolved. She forgot the names of her parents. She forgot the face of her first love. She forgot everything except the task in front of her. Hold the bridge. Hold the bridge. Hold the bridge. 9 hours. 10. The pain was beyond description. Every nerve in her body was screaming. Her heart was failing. Her lungs were failing. She was dying in slow motion, and she knew it, and she did not stop. "Commander Vasquez," the Valkyrie said. Their voice was different now. Softer. Sadder. "We called your kind mortals. We meant IT as a description of your weakness, your limited lives, your fragile bodies." Vasquez could barely hear them. She could barely think. But she managed to respond. "And now? Now we understand that we were wrong. Your mortality is not your weakness. It is your strength. You know that your time is limited, and so you do not waste it. You do not hesitate. You do not calculate whether others are worthy of your sacrifice." 11 hours. The last Valkyrie. Consciousness crossed the bridge. 17 billion minds saved. An entire civilization preserved. Commander Elena Vasquez let go. The bridge collapsed. The tunnel closed. The connection between dimensions was severed forever. On the other side, in human space, the Valkyrie emerged into a new reality. Changed. Diminished in some ways. But alive. On the Prometheus, Commander Vasquez died with a smile on her face. Her last thought, her very last moment of consciousness, was not of fear or regret or pain. It was satisfaction. Pure, simple satisfaction. She had answered the call. She had done her job. Everyone deserved a chance, and she had given them one. The Valkyrie had never known grief before. For millions of years, they had been beyond such things. They did not die, not really. When one of them faded, their consciousness was preserved, absorbed into the overmind, remembered forever. Loss was not permanent. Goodbye was not forever. But Commander Elena Vasquez was gone. Truly gone. Her consciousness had not been preserved. Her memories had not been saved. She had burned herself out completely, leaving nothing behind but an empty body in the command chair of the Prometheus. The Valkyrie grieved. 17 billion minds, newly arrived in human space, felt something they had not felt in eons. Sadness. Real, terrible sadness. Not for themselves, they had been saved, but for the small mortal being who had given everything so that they could live. They did not understand humans. They were not sure they ever would. But they understood sacrifice. They understood courage. And they understood that Elena Vasquez had been something special. The Prometheus returned to Earth 3 weeks after the rescue. It carried its crew exhausted, traumatized, but alive in the body of its commander. It also carried something else, a message from the Valkyrie. Overmind. The message was broadcast to every human being in the solar system. "We are the Valkyrie," the message began. "We are old, older than your stars, older than your worlds. For millions of years, we believed we were alone in the cosmos. We believed that when we died, no one would mourn us. No one would remember us. We were wrong. Your kind heard our cry. Your kind came to our aid. Your kind saved yous, not because you were asked, not because you expected reward. but because you believed that nitrogen monoxide, one should die alone in the darkness. We do not fully understand. Your lives are so short. Your bodies are so fragile. You measure your existence in decades, not millennia, by our old standards. You are barely a flicker of light in an eternal night. But we have learned that brightness is not measured in duration. We have learned that meaning is not measured in years. We have learned that the smallest flame can illuminate the darkest void. Commander, Elena Vasquez gave her life for US. She did not hesitate. She did not calculate. She saw beings in need and she acted. In her final hours, she held open a door between worlds, burning herself out so that we could pass through. We will never forget her. We will never forget any of you. You called yourselves mortals. We called you mortals too, as an insult. And yes, a description of your weakness. But now we understand the truth. Your mortality is your greatest strength, because you know your time is limited. You waste none of it, because you know you will die. You live with purpose, because you know that every moment is precious. You fill each moment with meaning. We have lived for millions of years, and in all that time, we never truly lived. We existed, we endured, we waited. You taught us what it means to be alive. The message ended. But the Valkyrie were not finished. They built a monument on Earth. It stood on the edge of the Pacific Ocean, facing the stars. The Valkyrie designed it themselves, using their ancient knowledge to create something that would last forever. It was made of materials that would not rust, would not fade, would not crumble. It would stand for millions of years, long after human civilization had changed beyond recognition. The monument showed Commander Vasquez holding open a door of light. On one side, billions of beings passed through to safety. On the other side, a dying universe collapsed into nothing. The inscription was simple. The humans and Valkyrie had written it together. They called us mortals. They were right, but mortality was never our weakness. It was always our strength. We have so little time, and so we waste none of it. Below that, a second inscription. Here is remembered Elena Vasquez and the 312 humans who gave their lives building the technology that saved 17 billion beings from oblivion. They heard a cry in the darkness. They answered it. They are the best of what humanity can be. The Valkyrie settled in human space. They were different now, smaller, weaker, more limited than they had been in their own dimension. The fundamental constants of human reality did not support the kind of existence they had once known. They could no longer live for millions of years. They could no longer think across quantum networks that spanned star systems. They were, in a sense, becoming mortal themselves, and they discovered that they did not mind. We spent eons existing, the Overmind said to Dr. Amara Okonkwo, who had become the primary liaison between humans and Valkyrie. We thought that was enough. We thought that living forever was the goal, the purpose, the meaning of existence. What do you think now? Amara asked. Now we think that existence without purpose is just waiting. You mortals, you humans, you know that your time is limited. And so you fill it with meaning. You create. You love. You sacrifice. You live. The Valkyrie paused. We want to learn how to do that. We want to learn how to live, truly live, in the time we have. Will you teach us? Amara smiled. We would be happy to. Years passed. The Valkyrie and humans worked together, building a new civilization that combined ancient wisdom with youthful energy. The Valkyrie shared their technology, their knowledge, their understanding of the cosmos. Humans shared something more valuable, their perspective, their appreciation for the present moment, their ability to find joy in small things, to love fiercely, to live fully. The monument on the Pacific coast became a place of pilgrimage. Humans and Valkyrie came from across the solar system to stand before it, to remember what had happened, to remind themselves of what was possible. When beings reached out to help each other across the void, the Valkyrie tended the monument themselves. They who had once thought themselves above such things, grief, gratitude, memory, now understood why these things mattered. They placed flowers at the base of the statue. They told stories of Elena Vasquez to their children, to the new generation of Valkyrie, who had been born in human space and had never known the dying dimension, and they added their own inscription to the monument. It appeared one morning, carved into the base in letters that glowed with soft light. We are the Valkyrie. We thought we were alone. We thought our existence would end in darkness, unremarked and unmourned. We were wrong. The mortals heard us. The brief ones, the finite ones, the creatures who measure their lives in heartbeats rather than eons, they heard our cry and came for us. They gave their lives for ours. They taught us that it is not the length of existence that matters, but what you do with it. We are the Valkyrie. We were saved by humanity, and we will never forget. The sun set over the Pacific. The stars came out, one by one. Somewhere out there, in the spaces between dimensions, the void remained dark and empty dot. But here, in this reality, in this moment, the light was bright, and it would never go out.